conversation on career exploration and a little bit of self-reflection is what we're going for today. So I'm going to do my best to have the chat up, but Madeline, if you can notify me if I'm barreling on and somebody has put something in the chat. Once you start sharing, it's always a little finicky how much it wants to show you what's going on in there. And I say that because we're going to start off with a pop quiz. So I want to know, how many students do you think enter the University of Utah decided? And just throw, you can throw a percentage, whatever you want in the chat. There we go. Okay, 50%, 30, okay. 20%, these are actually lower than I was expecting. So actually, I think Jenna's the closest. It's 66%, about 2/3 actually of students enter the university decided. So roughly 33% of students might identify as undecided. And we're actually working on gathering like the most up-to-date data on this because I'm curious to see if that's changed at all in the last 5 years. But second question, of course, how many students are going to change their major at least once? That is very specific, Taylor. 81.5%. 65, 70, okay. 80%. We've got some in the right vicinity. 3 times. Yes, Jasmine, that is so common. It's about 75% of students who are going to change their major at least once. And this is something actually, again, our team is working on collecting a little bit more data because we're very curious to see, of those 75% of students, how many of them are like, how many times are they changing, right? But what we do have is some evidence that students who change their major at least once are actually have a slightly higher graduation rate than people who just kind of stick with it. And that's kind of an interesting thing to parse out. But I think the message there is that it's okay to want to change your major. It's okay to want to explore other options. And we're going to go into a couple of myth versus reality about the majors that you choose. So looking at this one thing we hear a lot is my major is going to lead to my career. So the example that we have here is studying a language, Japanese, and then a career as a translator. So first question I have is, what other careers can you think of for someone who majored in Japanese? What do you think that person would end up doing? Government service, teaching. Is that DoD, like Department of Defense? I'm going to assume that's what that means. Writing, communication. Okay, yeah. All right. So I like that we have more than just teaching. Teaching is probably the most common, and I totally get that. That's what I would probably have first thought of as well. And I put this one on here actually because I'm pulling from a former student of mine who graduated in Japanese and is actually now working on the education side of Goldman Sachs here in Salt Lake. And the path he took to get there was actually working as a financial advisor at Northwestern Mutual. And he got into that through an internship. So he had an internship, then he did the financial advising there, took a position with Wells Fargo, and then from Wells Fargo went over to Goldman Sachs. So not usually the trajectory that we think of for people who study languages. The next one we're going to look at is the majority of CEOs majored in business. And you can just say like yes or no. What do you think? No, I mean, yeah, like it's obviously where I'm going with this, right? No, they did not all major in business. So all of these people are like C-suite level executives at major companies. And this one actually, Rosalind Brewer, she just was promoted like the first woman of color, I think, to be a CEO of a major company. She's going to be the CEO of Walgreens. And there might be like more definition than just a major company like Fortune 500. I can't remember, but I did see that was like just announced maybe a week ago. She was COO of Starbucks when we put her on here, and she majored in chemistry. So yeah, it is Fortune 500. Thank you. Does the student still make use of his Japanese skills? That's a great question. I will have to text and ask how much he uses his Japanese. We stayed in touch, so I'll find out. So, and then we have, let's see, Danielle Lee is a global VP of Spotify, majored in political science, not a direct connection there at all. Ed Catmull is a super famous, or like one of the highest achieving, I guess I would say, like alumni of the University of Utah. And he majored in physics and computer science. Jen Wong at the top, COO of Reddit. Reddit's having a moment right now. Yeah, she majored in applied math. And then Whitney Wolf, this is my favorite one. She's a co-founder of Tinder and the founder of Bumble, and she majored in international studies. So really no connection there at all. So I really love kind of just pointing out that your career trajectory is just not necessarily going to be as linked to your major as it might seem. And that can be a positive thing in that hopefully it helps reduce the pressure of like, I have to choose the right thing or opportunities are going to like close away from me. But it also can kind of be like, okay, well, now that I can choose anything, what do I choose? So we're going to look a little at like, how do you make that decision? And we have a flow chart that we follow with choosing a major. So looking at exploring occupations. So obviously you can't not talk about careers at all. That's definitely a component of why you're going to university and what you want to eventually do. Exploring yourself, your own interests, abilities, and values, and how that lines up with your future. And then exploring majors. You can only major in what's actually offered at the university, right? So we're going to start with actually the majors, but the other thing I wanted to talk about are minors and certificates, because a lot of students who've transferred did not go to an institution where they could have utilized minors and certificates before, right? Community colleges don't typically have minors, but at universities, it's like you could add as many minors as you wanted. There's maybe a limit on how many you actually want to, but what do you do with that, right? So we're actually going to deviate from our presentation here and look at two ways that you can kind of explore what the university has to offer you. So if it will go. There we go. All right, this one takes you to the major exploration page. So yes, I'm plugging my own website. And we are working on updating this page. It's going to be so clean, so crisp soon. We're not quite there yet, but the information is constantly being reviewed. And this, you can look at, it says all majors, it's actually everything. You could filter it down by interest area if you are like, I want to look at social justice and advocacy. What are some programs that kind of hit on that area of interest? And that's going to narrow it down for you. You can go by college if you're like, oh, I just want to know what Mines and Earth Sciences has to offer me. What can I do in Mines and Earth Science? And then if you deselect all of these, you could bring it down to just looking at minors and certificates. Let's see if it wants to play ball today. Oh, okay, it's actually going to hold on to that first filter and then come down to Mines and Earth and then just minors and certificates there. So we know which of these programs now have minors. As we flip these tiles over, then you can actually see that. So you could also look without using the filter to see what it is. Like, oh, this is just a minor. Click over, learn a little bit more about it, career opportunities, program descriptions, exploratory classes, link to the catalog. And that's so helpful because the catalog is where we're going to go next. This is giving us some good kind of context of what this program is, a little bit of what you would be studying. It's not telling us though, like, what are all the classes that I have to take? And the reason it's not doing that is because that is what the catalog is for. So going just to catalog.utah.edu, you can also run down all of the undergraduate degrees here. But if we wanted to click, or not click on anything, there we go, on minors, we get an alphabetical list of everything that the university will let you declare in terms of a minor. These black ones are not active anymore, so we're just looking at the red hyperlinked options as far as what we can declare. If we were to click on, say, campaign management, so we're not getting a huge description. We have a link to their page on hinckley.utah.edu, but we don't get like a huge description of what campaign management actually is. So that's kind of the benefit of that other page. But we do see here, it's around 24 to 33 total credits, and then lists of the classes that you would actually be choosing from. And if we click on the classes, it will give us a description of what that class is. So these are two really important tools in kind of figuring out what are my major and minor options. What can I actually do? So I'm wondering, does anyone have questions about minors or certificates as far as like, do you feel clear on the difference between them? Questions about how to declare them, anything like that?
I actually don't know anything about declaring certificates. Certificates are really new to me.
Cool. So certificates, okay, so you're not alone. I can see that in the chat. So certificates are kind of interesting. One of the biggest technical differences between minors and certificates is that minors have to be declared as part of your overall degree. So you need to be earning a major, a bachelor's degree, in order to declare a minor. But a certificate could be completed totally outside of that. So if we were to go look at the certificates, let's see, back here. Undergraduate and graduate level certificates obviously are something you might look at after you finish your bachelor degree, but all of these undergraduate certificates you could consider. You could actually just complete a data fluency certificate, and that could be granted totally independently of a bachelor's degree. So that's one big technical difference, like I said. Where it gets a little messier, some of these certificates are going to be actual certifications, like teaching English to speakers of other languages is a TESOL certificate. And that's recognized nationwide. It's also recognized internationally. There are a couple different ways you can get certified to teach English, but it's known as one of the more academic levels. Then you have others that are going to be a little bit more, I guess, disciplinary, like gerontology, for instance. So looking at this, that doesn't certify you to become a gerontologist, obviously. It just gives you kind of like a good focus in that area. So in that sense, I'm not gonna lie, it's actually a little difficult to say what the difference there is from a minor. Academically, it's not that different. You're taking a very similar sequence of classes. So in those cases, again, the biggest difference is just that it could theoretically be granted independently of your degree. So.
And are they granted independently? Like if I'm not done with my program yet, would I still like receive a certificate if I had finished that program?
You could actually, yeah, you could apply for it when you finished it. You'd work with the advisor to do that. And they, to my knowledge, don't totally quote me on this, but I did do the TESOL certificate after I graduated, so I know it's possible. And they did send me another diploma to frame for the certificate. So I would assume that they will send a certificate diploma, even if you were in the middle of your bachelor degree still. And yeah, they are kind of for your resume, right? So they're showing that you did have a focus in that area. So if they're disciplinary, like gerontology, say you were wanting to work in social work, a gerontology certificate would make it clear that you had studied aging and that you were familiar with that population, especially if you wanted to work with that population. So that would be a way it would add to your resume. To qualify you for a specific job, some of them, so like substance use disorder treatment training, I imagine there are going to be roles that would specifically look for you to have this kind of a certificate in order to work in substance use disorder treatment training, exactly what it sounds like. So there are some where I think it's going to be a little bit more just complimentary to show that you have a background in that area. And then there's others where it's actually going to be qualifying for that work. So, and they have, I'm trying to remember, there is a name, like disciplinary is more looking at the ones that are complementary to your resume. I wish I can remember the name for the other one where you're actually getting a certificate granted. But when you look into them, it is, I think, reasonably clear. And if you talk to the advisor for that certificate, they could definitely give you the rundown on how students are utilizing it. Any other certificate or minor type questions? Okay. Oh, so yeah, it is all through an advisor to declare minor certificates and majors. You're going to meet with an academic advisor for that program or in that department. With minors, it's actually a good question. You do actually have to declare your major first. So, and this is just a system processing type thing. The way it works is that if you don't have a major declared, the advisor is not able to add the minor on to anything. And I think that has to do with the fact that technically minors can't be granted independently. So the way they set it up was like, oh, if these can't be granted independently, then when you declare them, you need to attach them to a major. So you could absolutely still meet with the advisor for that minor, go over the program requirements, and then they might say, okay, come back and we'll get this declared once you've added your major. So kind of a weird, that one's just kind of, like I said, a weird processing type thing. All right. Okay.
Well, thank you. That definitely helps because I'm still, for my major, I'm still a pre-biology student in this case, and that means I wouldn't be able to declare a minor just yet. So that does go exactly.
It would be
most, situation.
Yeah. It's like with biology, where biology is an open major, which means you can just, you can declare it by meeting with the major advisor whenever you're ready.
Right.
Yeah, it would just be more efficient to meet with biology first and then with the other. There are some others like pre-business where you might have a longer admissions process to get into that major. You could certainly still meet with the minor advisor. They can attach it to a pre-major systematically. Sometimes the system will kick the minor off when the major gets changed. So you can still do it. Now we're getting into like the weeds a little bit, but like FYI, the system is a little wacky sometimes. When your major is not all the way fully declared, it can be a little finicky with the minors. So that's more of just a heads up than anything. But if you're looking at it and you're like, but I have like 3 years until I'm actually going to be, well, hopefully it's not 3 years, but you know, I have some time before I'm actually going to be admitted into that program and I want to add the minor, you could add it just so that you knew you were on that list for a while. You can always re-add it if it gets kicked off when your major is fully declared.
Can you speak to, I assume it's different in each college, but at what, in what year would a student generally lock down onto a major from a pre-major declaration? Is that a fluid thing, I guess?
I would say once a student is pretty confident, like this is the major I want to do, I'm ready to declare, probably 80% of the majors on campus will let you just declare that by meeting with an advisor. So my advice is always, once you know what you want to major in, declare it. Get that on your record. That locks in your set of requirements. You're set into that catalog year. You're on the advisor's list of students. There's lots of benefits there. The other 20% are going to be programs that have some level of selective admissions. And that's going to be the things like business, nursing, engineering a little bit. Social work, I think, has a little bit of an admissions process as well. So those, the timeline varies because there are prerequisite courses, right? So if you had transferred here and you had already completed all of your prerequisite courses, you may be admitted within like a semester and good to go, and you'll have that declared. If you're still working on all of those, it could be a longer timeline. But yeah, the process for the majority of majors is literally just the student deciding and then going and meeting and declaring it with the advisor.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any others? I'm happy to stay on this topic as long as we need to. No, we're good? Okay, you can bring them back up. If you think of something at the end, obviously you can always ask that later. All right, so going back to our slides, we're going to move on from, so that was a good conversation about how to declare your major, how to look for different majors, minor certificates, what's out there for that side of things. The next piece of that is going to be career exploration. So we know, again, major career, not necessarily a direct link. And that generally means that you want to do some more career exploration, right? Want to figure out, okay, it's not a direct link, but how am I going to get from A to B? And what do I even want B to be? Like, what do I want to do? So the Career Center is amazing. Number one resource that I didn't utilize as a student that I should have. So take that as you will. They have a live chat, so virtual career studio hours. It's all on their website, careers.utah.edu. But those virtual career studio hours are Mondays through Fridays from 2 until 7. So it's kind of nice. They go into the evening a little bit there. They have help on resumes, cover letters, internship and job search, career exploit, all of that stuff. You can also make individual career coaching appointments. And although my whole message is not to wait, you can access their services for 2 years after graduation as well. So if you build that relationship early, that can serve you for quite a long time. So other things you can do if you're like, no, I really need to like actively explore options. ONET Online, that's the side one here. That is an awesome website run by the Department of Labor. And it's a really interesting resource for just looking up different career options, learning about different occupation areas, salary checks. I did check academic advising it's under like education, comma, other. So I think like Madeline's role, my role, and a lot of student services roles are going to be included in that education other. And you can narrow it down to the state of Utah. And honestly, I thought the median salary was like fairly accurate. So I'm going to, assume based on that it's reasonably accurate with others as well. So again, it's run by the Department of Labor, so I would hope that it's fairly accurate. It also has this little thing called Bright Outlook Careers. So you can find, it's like a little sun next to it that kind of tells you, we expect this area to grow. We expect jobs to be easier to come by in this area, that sort of a thing. So good tool to use. The class that I have on here, UGS 1950, it's literally just a career exploration class. Our office teaches the major exploration side of things, but as transfer students, if you feel like you've narrowed that down a little bit faster, you might actually really benefit from doing the career exploration class instead. So it gives you, what I like about classes like that, like it's 1 credit, so it's not going to be massive in your schedule necessarily. And it just sort of forces you to devote that time to doing it, right? You're like, maybe you would say, oh, I'm going to spend all this time on ONET. Like I'm going to go to the Career Center and take these assessments. And then somehow you just like never actually get to doing it. If it's in a class and someone's saying this assessment is due next week, you'll do it. So if you know that that kind of structure really helps you, you might look for this in your fall schedule. The last piece with this that I'll share is that there's actually a little pathway with it. So, I mean, you can take this, either of them separately. You don't have to do both, but it's kind of cool. They've set up that 1 credit half semester career exploration. And then as you get a little bit closer to graduation, you have a 2 credit full semester 3,000 level class. So if you need a little more upper division credit, that's a bonus, focused on job and internship searching. So I really, really recommend, looking into those and utilizing those if you feel like you want a little more specific guidance. Some colleges have their own versions of these classes, and those are awesome too. So don't dismiss just because I didn't say, oh, you should take the Humanities Career Compass. That's a good one too. Career Center is involved with those courses as well. But if you're in a college where you're like, oh, that class isn't quite right for me, or maybe it's taught at a time that just doesn't work, but you really wanted to get into it, these are open to any student, any major, and are really great options as well. So, and then the last piece, of course, I mentioned career coaching in the first one. Career coaches teach these classes. Career coaches help with the college-specific job classes. You can always make an appointment with a career coach for one-on-one career talks. So don't forget that side of things. Careers.utah.edu will have all of their contact info and instructions on what to do. All righty. So we're going to shift into, we've done the exploring majors. We've done a little bit of looking at exploring occupations. We're going to move into a little bit of reflection and exploring yourself. So I'm going to start with this values exercise, and then we'll move on to decision making. So for this exercise, I'm going to describe a job to you. And it looks like a lot of us have our cameras on, but I mean, you can do this either way. But you're going to raise your hand. And as I describe each feature of this job, you keep your hand up as long as you are interested in taking it. And if at any point I say something that you're like, yeah, I'm not taking this job, you can go ahead and put your hand down. So we'll start with salary. You're going to make close to $70,000 a year. Like, okay, sounds good. You're going to need strong verbal communication skills. You might have a varied schedule. It could include nights and weekends. You'll spend a lot of time standing on your feet. You're going to sometimes deal with difficult people. Might not be like every minute, but like there's going to be some difficult people. Okay. And your last one, some people would consider your workplace to be immoral. No, we're not really, yeah. Okay, so in the chat, tell me, what do you think the job is and are you taking it? Sales. Yeah, lots of difficult people in sales. Yep. Nursing, but why would nursing be immoral? Any other guesses? Interesting. Military. Depends on your religion. Yeah, that's true. Okay. I'll add you one other piece. This job is technically illegal in the state of Utah. Oh, that's the first time someone's got it. It's probably because I gave the extra, I gave you the extra piece. It is a casino gaming supervisor. So at what point did you decide not to take this job if you put your hand down? Anyone? Yeah, go Taylor. You can also, you put your hand back up when I said it was illegal. Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't mean you would take it, I guess, in the state of Utah. In Nevada, say. You went to Wendover and you took this job. All right.
They have to have a degree for that job?
What's that?
They have to have a degree.
It's a great question. I would imagine, I actually have no idea. Probably not.
They prefer if you have a background in hospitality or hotel industries. I did apply for it.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yep.
That makes a ton of sense. So yeah, they'd be looking for something like a Parks Rec tourism, sustainable tourism and hospitality, something like that. I was like, do they want someone in like math so they know when people are counting cards? I don't know. So I like barely even understand how counting cards works. Yeah, bachelors are hired for supervisor positions. That makes total sense as well. I was going to say, my guess is that if you started a career in a casino and you worked there for a long time, oh, my dog's making an appearance. You work there for a long time, that they might promote you to that just based on experience. But if you wanted to start, at a little bit of a higher level, then they would probably look for that bachelor's degree. So the reason that we did this exercise, if you're like, okay, that was fun, but like, how does that connect? It's all about values, right? Your values are what guided whether or not you said yes or no to taking those, the job, as I explain more and more about it. So values are our guiding principles of life. Motivators, they can be inspirational, give us some purpose as we're moving forward, definitely influence our decisions, actions, and behaviors. And they can be as high level as saying, I'm not going to do something that's immoral or illegal, or even deciding what you think is immoral or illegal, right? There's absolutely varying definitions of that. But they can also be as simple as saying, I prioritize being at home at the same time every day. So when you said this was varying and nights and weekends, I was no longer interested because I don't want that in my life. They are chosen and influenced, obviously, by our culture, society, and family, and transcend specific situations. They should theoretically be the same across the board in applying to things. So work, personal life, and you get to choose them. It's up to you. What you want your values to be is completely up to you. So kind of an interesting thing we see if we were to dig a little farther down is that children, developmentally, children are probably just going to repeat the values of the people around them, right? Like whatever it is that their parent says, there's a good chance that they're going to repeat that as like hard fact and truth. But then as you become an adolescent, you start to explore and kind of question, right? Like, why did my mom say that? That's like, what? Why does my mom have a thing against casino? Are casinos really bad? Like, does gambling matter that much? I don't know. And then of course, as we progress into early adulthood and onward, we start to kind of figure them out for ourselves and solidify them for ourselves. So 3 C's, clarifying, claiming, and committing. If you are, I think in terms of jobs and things like that, you are thinking through a lot of these areas, right? And even in your major, if it is a major, like say nursing, that is going to lead to a pretty specific profession, you're going to be thinking through how much do I value, again, a consistent schedule? and being home at the same time every single day? Or do I actually value some flexibility? Do I actually put a higher value on, like, I like that I'm working, say, 3/12s, and sometimes that's overnight and sometimes that's during the day because I want that. You know, I want a little bit of difference week to week. I don't want the same thing all the time. So you can Google, if you Google just like list of values to get you started, you'll find, you know, some are more personal, some are kind of geared toward careers, and kind of any combination of them can be useful. The Career Center as well can be really good for this. They have career values, kind of activities, card sorts, different things that you could utilize to kind of think through it. Because career-wise, you're also thinking about things like, you know, your salary versus the amount of time that you're working. Do you value a really high salary? And if you do, that's awesome. That's totally cool to have that value. But it's probably going to affect how many hours a week that you're working and what kind of hours you're working and when you're expected to be available, so on and so forth. Like, as I always joke, like, no one in higher ed really works for like the crazy high money. We all know that, but what we get in return is a lot of security, defined hours. We usually get a lot of fulfillment from the work that we're doing. So there is a trade-off there, and that's all a value decision. All right, so your next steps with those, you can kind of write, journal about it, kind of try and get it out on paper and see what you're thinking, talk to people you trust, let them guide your decisions a little bit. And then of course, researching majors, careers, involvement opportunities that look compatible with your values. All right, so our last piece we're going to talk about is decision-making strategies. And this is highly related to major exploration. All of this research actually comes from education, major exploration. And they've identified 6 main decision-making strategies. So I want you to think about either what strategy you used if you've already decided on your major, or what strategy you're currently using to kind of think about it. So our first one is procrastinator. I know I have to make a decision, but I'm gonna just like put it off. I'm just not gonna do it until the last moment. Impulsive is first choice that seems reasonable. Oh, I like English, that sounds good. I think I'm just gonna major in that. Don't need any other info. Agonizing is, I have literally thought about this so much and I have so much information and I've made an entire Excel spreadsheet to compare all of these and now I don't know what to do. That's how I would define agonizing. Then we have compliant. You know what? Everybody keeps telling me that I would be a really good teacher, so I think I'm just going to do that. Somebody told me it was a good idea. Intuitive is maybe more like, it's going to feel right. Like I'm just going to do, like one of these is going to like feel right to me and not the one I'm going to do. And the last one, planful. I feel like you can see where we're going with this. I'll make a decision based on orderly, rational process, requiring solid information, reflection, and both thinking and feeling. Again, I'm muting you. There we go. All right. So is anyone comfortable sharing what style they think that they primarily used to decide on their major? Or any other decision if they want to share a different decision?
I think I was definitely impulsive because the previous institution that I was at, right out of high school, it was something, I don't know if anybody like looked at their, what is it called? Their ACT. And there's like a list of jobs that it recommends, or like a list of like majors that it like might recommend you do in college. And one of them was medical laboratory sciences. And I was like, sure, I'm going to do that. And so I started doing that, and I hated it. And then I ended up not doing it. So yeah, I think I was just like an impulse thing. Like, yes, they told me I'd be good at that, so I'm going to do it.
That is so interesting. So I would say that was kind of a combo of impulsive, but also compliant, right? In this case, it was the ACT told you this would be good for you. So therefore, I'm going to try it. Little impulsive and intuitive. Turns out you really like plant biology. That's awesome. And I should say, sometimes like obviously we're looking for planful decision-making in major exploration, but there are times where other strategies do work well for you. So, you know, intuitive, some people do find that something feels right and it turns out to be a great match and it's good and they move on. Not everybody gets that feeling. about a major, like it is homework. It is work in a way. And you may not always just be like, wow, this just feels right. You may have to make a bit more of a strategic decision that way. So there are times where it's really great for some people, and there's times where it's really not. I don't know that compliant is ever quite the right way to go. I think it's unusual for that to match up perfectly, that what everybody told you to do was definitely the right thing to do without any other research on your behalf, but yeah. So yeah, that's true. You can't plan for everything, and there are factors you don't expect after a decision. And I would also say it can be a bit of a process, right? Like you can go through a lot of different stages. I think you can start telling yourself it's going to be planful. I'm going to do this so orderly. It's going to be great. And then that can quickly sort of morph into that agonizing of like, I have done now so much orderly and rational processing that I have totally overwhelmed myself. And you kind of have to pull yourself back in and realize like it's a balance of thinking and feeling. So ultimately what we're going for is kind of like a balance of these things. So yeah, and it's exactly what I think what Jessica just shared in the chat. Kind of started with compliant and then sort of agonized over it and then ended up going into that planful decision making. So, all right, so how do we do? We're going to expand a little bit on that planful decision making, like what does that actually look like? So how am I going to do this? And that, first you're defining your goal. And this is we're talking about choosing majors right now, or maybe you could say choosing careers. You could apply this really to any major decision in your life. If you think of like, what's coming after I finish university, it could be taking another job in the future. It could be like buying a house, whatever. Define your goal. Assess your alternatives. There's always going to be an upside to one thing, downside to another. Other options you could do. Gather information. So in this one, I would say there's an amount of information and then like it could go too far. So gather the most relevant information. Look at the outcomes and the consequences. And then it's creating a plan of action. All right, I figured out like this neighborhood I think has the best, value, best bang for my buck. This is where I want to live. Now I need a plan of action. How am I going to get a house in that neighborhood? And then if you realize I'm just using this buying house. I've never bought a house, so I don't know why this is on my mind. But anyway, as you go through it, you're kind of like, you know what? I put in offers on 3 different houses in this neighborhood and they're not happening. Like I am either going to have to, I'm going to have to go back and kind of assess my alternatives or even look at my outcomes and consequences because I'm going to have to either go way over budget or I'm going to have to find a new neighborhood. So you might have to refine that goal or objective as you get through it. But yeah, using that sequence, and it's not always going to be linear, right? Because I just circled way back to the beginning when I was at the very last one. So we like to think of it a little bit more like a flow to get through that. But that's the process of what we're going for when we talk about kind of making a planful decision. All right, so next steps, and this is my last one. So any questions that you have, this is a great time to throw them at me. But transfer specific resources. Transfer.utah.edu is our transfer program website. So you'll find a lot of stuff on there. The rest of these are actually kind of opportunities that you might look into. UROP is research for undergraduate students. ASUU, Associated Students of the University of Utah, student government. Handshake is the platform that the Career Center uses for practically everything. So you'll want to get registered on that or activate your Handshake account through careers.utah.edu. On-campus jobs gets you involved in higher education, gets you connected to more people, works around your class schedule almost always. Hinckley Institute is for internships. And the reason we throw all this on there is like, how is this transfer specific? Okay, any student can do these. Transfer students are like not the only people who can access these. Transfer students usually benefit from accessing them sooner, right? You're closer to graduation, you already have credit. So the sooner that you access these, the more chance you have to benefit from them. The sooner that you go ask about internships and find out from Hinckley, like, okay, 1, they have a zillion options. 2, I actually have to apply fairly far in advance. So if I wait like a year and I only have a year left to graduate, like I am pushing it out there. And that's okay, you can do that. But since you're here, I would advise you to learn more about these things earlier. That's usually the message with transfer students generally, is that we know you have a shorter amount of time on campus. So it really does kind of mean, you have to look into, you can't delay on these things. You can't procrastinate them quite as much as maybe, you know, a first year freshman would be able to do.